Let's talk about the many subfields of self-help. Self-help is an entire industry, an entire field, and a world really onto itself. Most people don't even know that self-help is a field or a domain of inquiry or something that you can pursue or something that you can seriously study. And for most people, just to discover the domain of self-help is already a life-changing event. I can recall very vividly the first time that I discovered self-help almost about 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago, when I walked into a Barnes & Noble bookstore and I discovered the self-help aisle, back when there were still Barnes & Noble bookstores in most towns. And I remember discovering that and just saying to myself, oh my God, this is like a whole new thing. This is a life-changing thing that I've discovered. And it was, because I could already immediately see the potential of it. Because for basically most of my early teenage life and my early 20s up to this point, I was interested in self-help type topics. Like I was interested in psychology, I was interested in philosophy, I was interested in what happiness was, I was interested in being more productive and so forth. But I didn't know about the field explicitly. I didn't know that there was an entire industry that catered to these types of people who were interested in this type of stuff. Experts who had studied this stuff for years and then put all their insights into books, and you could find it all in just one category in the book self-help section at a bookstore. You know, so for me that was a life-changing event, because what happens is that you pick up one of these self-help books and then that gives you all sorts of new ideas, and then you pick up another self-help book and that gives you another set of new ideas, and there's this sort of geometric expansion that happens where every book gives you some new ideas which sprout off into a bunch of new ideas, and each one of those sprouts off 10 more new ideas, and you get more resources, more ideas, more other subfields to study, and then all of a sudden you're very deep into this, and then your whole life changes 5, 10 years down the road. But self-help is a very broad category, super, super broad. So most of you who've been watching me probably now understand that there is this thing called self-help, or you could call it personal development, you could call it self-actualization. These are all same words for the same basic category of stuff. Self-improvement type of advice and material. But most people have no idea just how vast self-help is. It's both very vast in its breadth, and it's also very deep as well. And it's useful to break down this broad category of self-help into subfields, which is what we'll be doing today. I'll give you a long list of 20 or 30 subfields, which will help you for doing research, for finding books, for finding teachers, workshops, seminars, websites, videos, and so forth. It's really helpful to kind of know what all the territory looks like from a 30,000-foot elevation perspective. Then you can direct yourself towards the kinds of material and teachings and research that you need to solve your particular set of problems. A really big mistake that people make is they try to oversimplify self-help. And I notice that a lot of spiritual people do this, people who get into enlightenment work. They love to simplify self-help, and they just say, oh, Leo, but all that self-help and all of that, all of it just boils down to enlightenment. With enlightenment, if I get enlightenment, then everything else I don't need to know. And this is such a big mistake, such a huge oversimplification. There are so many problems that people have in life that have nothing to do with enlightenment. And while enlightenment is very important, and spirituality is very important, and consciousness work is very important, that's all very important stuff. But if you think you can boil all of life down just to that, you're in for a rude awakening. Your life is not going to turn out as well as you think it will. There's a lot of very specialized problems that life presents us with that require very specialized solutions and specialized expertise that you will never hear from some non-duality teacher, yogi, or guru, or Eckhart Tolle, or anyone else like that. What you have to understand is that most teachers become very specialized. And they might be very, very good and masterful at one particular thing that they teach, like non-duality. But don't expect them to help you solve all the other stuff in your life that's going wrong. And there's a lot of ways that your life can go wrong because there's so many traps, so many ways that your mind can deceive you and trick you. And there are many different categories in your life that you need to get into order, including your career, your finances, your health and fitness, and your education, and your relationships, and your family. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here to cover. So here's the list of subfields for self-help. Perhaps the biggest and most prominent one is success, productivity, and goal setting. For me, that's one giant chunk of what self-help is about. And this is how probably most people actually get into self-help, is through this kind of thing. Because most people in our society in first world countries are very stage orange, spiral dynamic stage orange. They're very success oriented. So when you're, for example, walking through an airport and you're walking by one of those little snack kiosks that they have there, they have all the snacks and candy bars and bottled water and so forth. But then they always have a rack of self-help books. Right there, it's right in front of you. You can't walk by the place without seeing those self-help books. And what are those usually? Those are usually the most mainstream of self-help books. And a lot of them have to do with how to be more successful, how to be more productive, how to set goals, and stuff like this. Why is that? Because that's very appealing to most people. It's very easy to sell them on success and productivity because you sell it to them as like, well, I'll pay 20 bucks for this book, and I'll get my money back by increasing my success at work by even a few %. If I do that, I'll recoup all my money. So it pays for itself. Another big category of self-help, subfield, is law of attraction. A lot of books have been written about law of attraction, how to use various visualization and affirmation techniques, and how to use your mind to instill yourself with the sort of confidence that you need to achieve your own goals. And so law of attraction is sort of a different perspective on how to be successful and productive. In fact, the most successful and popular self-help book of all time by Napoleon Hill, Think and Get Rich, that book has sold tens and tens and tens of millions of copies. And I think it's called, Think and Grow Rich. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. That's just a self-help classic. And that's really just one of the various kinds of law of attraction books that exist out there. There's also the subfield of time management, how to manage your time better. There's the subfield of career and life purpose. How do you find your life purpose? How do you get your career in order? How do you master your career? What are the tricks and tips and mindsets you need to be successful in your career? And that's very easy to sell to people because, again, your career is how you earn money. So if I can promise you some tips that are gonna improve your career opportunities, you are gonna pull out your wallet really quickly. That's something that's just like very practical. It's not esoteric. It's not mystical. It's not spiritual. It's just like, yeah, just help me with my career. That's a very easy sell. Very common entry point into the self-help field. Another subfield is creativity. There are a lot of books and courses available out there that will teach you how to become more creative, how to become a better artist, how to deal with creative anxiety and fear and various kinds of obstacles that artists and creative people face. And that's a really fascinating subfield and one that I'll be talking and shooting some videos about in the future some more, because I love being creative. I love studying ways how to improve my own creativity, but that's not really a focus of Actualized.org per se. There's also the subfield of business and entrepreneurship. There's so many seminars and workshops and books and products out there that are created for business people. Serious business people who are very hard-nosed. They need practical advice in their particular line of business. So the advice could be just generic business advice, or it could be more specialized or super, super highly specialized, depending on what kind of business you want to run, whether you're a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer or a online entrepreneur or whatever. There's material out there written for you. So a lot of people enter from the business side. Of course, also there's the subfield of marketing and sales. And marketing and sales is interesting because you would think like, well, what does marketing and sales have to do with self-help? But actually, this goes back to the early days of self-help. Marketing and sales has always been taught alongside with self-help because, as it turns out, marketing and sales skills are pivotal for being able to develop your own financial independence, for being able to be persuasive, to be able to pitch your products and services, your business if you want to be an entrepreneur, or even if you're not going to be an entrepreneur, just to be able to be successful in your career and in your workplace, you need some marketing and sales skills. Whether you're doing a presentation for your boss or you're competing with another team at work, all of this requires some marketing and sales skills. And in general, for you to be providing a lot of value in your company and in your job, you want to have some marketing and sales skills. For example, if you're a programmer, you might think, oh, Leo, but I'm just a programmer. I don't need marketing and sales skills. Right. Well, actually, that's why you're not rising up the corporate ladder, is because programming skills can only take you so far in how much value you can provide. But if you want to take your programming skills to the next level, you add some marketing and sales skills into that as well. And then when you're sitting there talking with your boss in your meeting in the morning, it's very clear which programmers in that team meeting have marketing and sales skills and which ones don't. Because it's one thing to just be talking about programming and coding something technical and nerdy. But for you to really be successful in business, you need to be able to make sure that your programming actually has marketing value and that it fits in with the sales goal and the marketing goals and that it all works together to advance the larger goals of your business. And since business survives and lives off marketing and sales, people who have these skills become the most valued and the most paid in the corporation. Or if you're working for yourself, it's super important to have these skills. So there's a lot of material out there that teaches you marketing and sales. You do have to be a little bit careful. Some of it can be pretty sleazy. Some of it can be downright black hat and unethical. So watch out who you're getting your marketing and sales advice from and what you're using it for. It's very easy to take various kinds of advice from all of these categories and to misapply it or to use it for devilish, evil purposes in a selfish, egotistical manner. So you got to be careful with this advice. Make sure you apply it with the right intentions. Another subfield is leadership and management. There's a lot to learn about how to be a great leader and how to be a good manager. Another subfield is money management. There's a lot to learn about how to manage your money properly, how to save your money, how not to waste your money, how to invest your money, how to make your money work for you, how to hedge against inflation, so forth. And there's a lot of experts out there who can teach you that sort of stuff. Again, you got to be careful because when it comes to finance, business, marketing, and management of money, there is a lot of sleazy people out there who will, of course, offer you all sorts of schemes for how you can invest your money in their operation and get a bunch of money back. And you got to be careful about that stuff. Make sure you're getting solid advice, not just get-rich-quick schemes and flimsy, gimmicky type of stuff. Another subfield is dating and attraction. This is a very popular one because people generally suck at dating, struggle with dating. This goes to their core basic need of sex and intimacy and love. And so figuring out how to be more attractive as a man or a woman, how to date properly, to find better mates, that's quite challenging. And that can be an entry point for a lot of people into the self-help field. Also, of course, there's the relationship subfield, which is different and distinct from dating and attraction. Dating and attraction is about how to just basically find new people, meet new people, connect with new people. And then relationships is more about how to build longer lasting relationships. And it's very easy to get good at attraction, but be terrible at relationships because relationships require commitment, intimacy, honesty, communication skills, all of these kinds of skills that a lot of people who are good at attraction actually lack. So learning up on relationships is very important. And of course, everyone has huge relationship problems. People are so bad at relationships that there's so much that you can learn from learning and studying high quality relationship advice. There's also the subfield of love, how to be a more loving human being, which is, again, distinct from relationships and distinct from attraction and dating. And it's distinct from sexuality, too. We're going to get to sexuality in a minute here. But with love, most people are not taught how to love, what love is. I recently released an episode, What is Love? And as you can tell from that long episode, there was a lot of detail there and a lot of things that just go completely over people's heads because love is a very advanced topic. How to become a more loving human being is really a life project for you. And there's a lot of books that you can read that will teach you about that and will teach you about the importance of love. Most people don't even understand the importance of what love is and how powerful love is and how you can use love, for example, to build a powerful business and to actually earn money and all sorts of things like that. People think that love is somehow antithetical to practicality and to business and to finances. No, not at all. Not if you really understand what love is. There's also the subfield of family and marriage. How to manage your marriage. A lot of good books have been written about that, which most married couples never read. And then, of course, why are you surprised that they get divorced so often? Of course, because they don't really study this. It's such an important thing to study if you plan to get married. And if you plan to have a family, if you plan to have children, there's a lot of books that are written about how to manage your family and so forth. Then there's the subfield of sexuality, masculinity, and femininity. Most of us suck at sexuality because we're not taught about sexuality in school, because it's a taboo subject. We're not taught how to be good at sex. We're not taught how to please the opposite sex or please our partners. We're not taught what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman. We're not taught how to own our masculinity or our femininity. We don't really understand the opposite sex, how the opposite sex thinks, how they feel. And so this becomes a huge sticking point for a lot of people in relationships and with attraction. So studying this, there's many books, many great books written about this. And it's really worth your time to study. Then, of course, there's the huge, giant subfield of health, fitness, nutrition, and alternative medicine. All this I call basically health. But of course, within health, there's so much stuff there. You've got all those books about proper nutrition, which you were never taught about from your parents or from school. You've got a bunch of books about how to exercise effectively, how to lift weights properly, how to do yoga properly, if you're doing physical forms of yoga, various other kinds of health issues that arise for people. And of course, as you get older, this subfield becomes more and more important to you. And alternative medicine. Alternative medicine is a hugely powerful subfield with a lot of potential there. And most people poo-poo alternative medicine until they get a terrible condition themselves, which traditional classical Western medicine doesn't have any solutions for. And then that's when they turn to alternative medicine. They discovered a whole new world of stuff. And it's like your eyes are open by exploring alternative medicine and all the stuff that you didn't know about the human body and the human mind and the connection between those two. And then it starts to lead you down the rabbit hole of spirituality and so on. And just that one subfield right there could save your entire life, depending on what kind of problems you have. And of course, stage orange people generally take this entire health subfield, health, nutrition, all that for granted, until, of course, they suffer from various kinds of physical ailments and diseases that come from just going balls to the wall with stage orange, with that mentality. They become obese, they become overly stressed, overworked, and they get all sorts of subtle ailments and diseases that traditional medicine can't solve. And so that's when they start to take their health much more seriously. Or they do it because they want to look more attractive, so they learn how to eat healthy and how to diet and this sort of stuff, so they can build big muscles and look sexy and attract more beautiful people into their life. That's rather shallow and vain, but however you get into it, it's good. You start to take your health a little more seriously. Then there's a subfield of body awareness and disciplines like bioenergetics, which is all about becoming more conscious and aware of your body and the mind-body connection, as I talked about in my body awareness episode. And then how do you use and leverage the mind-body connection? How do you use your body in order to heal yourself psychologically? That's what bioenergetics is about. And there's lots of various kinds of sub-disciplines that were created that are analogous to something like bioenergetics, which teach you about how to use your body basically to cure yourself of various kinds of physical and psychological ailments. There's also the subfield of self-esteem and confidence. And this is a really important one for most people, because most people have terrible self-esteem. They have self-image issues. They lack confidence. They're shy. They are meek. They don't know how to set boundaries. They turn into doormats. They get abused by others in relationships. They don't know how to assert themselves. They don't know how to be decisive. They don't like their physical appearance. They have some sort of trauma from the past because they were ridiculed or bullied in school or something like that. They weren't the cool kids. And now you've got these self-esteem issues that are carried with you throughout your whole life, and they create a lot of suffering for you. So that's a really good subfield to study if you've got that problem. Another really big subfield is emotions, emotional mastery. And this subfield is huge. There's so much here because this basically is all about the quality of your life. And of course, we're not taught how to really recognize our own emotions, how to deal with our emotions. We don't even know how to be aware of our emotions and how to label our emotions properly. Most people don't even know how to label fear and anger and jealousy and depression and anxiety and all these sorts of things. But if you suffer from depression, anxiety, panic attacks, anger, jealousy, envy, fear, and this stuff is holding you back, then you got to study this subfield. And there's so much you can learn about your emotions. All sorts of various kinds of techniques that you can use to become more mindful of your emotions, to specifically focus on particular emotions that are problems for you. Some people have a problem with anger while others don't. So you don't want to focus on anger. Some people have a problem with depression while others don't. So you want to focus on depression. But even if you don't have one of these crippling, neurotic, emotional problems like depression or anger or anxiety, chances are you're still very deeply unconscious of your emotions overall. You don't know how to label them. Your emotional intelligence is very low. So developing that by studying this field is going to be life transforming for you. And closely related to that is the subfield of shadow work. Shadow work is about working with repressed aspects of your psyche and of your ego. There's a lot to talk about there. Entire books have been written about it. It's basically the work that most psychotherapists do. If you go to them, they'll help you to do shadow work on yourself, pulling up old memories and various kinds of neurotic, repressed issues that you have. But of course, you can also do it yourself. And in fact, in the future, pretty soon, I will be releasing a shadow work episode that will show you how to do it yourself. So that's a great subfield because almost everybody has a shadow. And that shadow holds you back. And even those people who do a lot of spiritual work, meditate a lot, do a lot of yoga, self-inquire, are really serious into non-duality, guess what? That will still not solve your shadow. Meditation alone doesn't generally solve shadow issues, which is why it's very dangerous to pursue enlightenment or meditation to the exclusion of all these other subfields, poo-pooing all these other subfields and saying, oh, I don't need any of those. If you do that, what's going to happen is, yes, you might become enlightened and you might become a great meditator, but you are still going to have problems with your relationships, problems due to your shadow, problems with sexuality, problems with your health and fitness, and so forth, problems with your emotions. There's also the subfield of addiction recovery. If you suffer from addiction problems, whether it's porn, sex, food, alcohol, hard drugs. These can be a source of huge life-destroying problems for people. And there's an entire category, subcategory of self-help that deals with helping addicts to recover and to create a new healthy lifestyle for themselves. And there are experts who are really good at that, people who have gone through it themselves, and you can read about their stories and how they went through the heartache and all the misery and suffering that goes with recovering from some of these hard wired addictions that you've developed. There's also trauma recovery as a subfield. Now, this one has to do with people who have been abused, molested, had various kinds of trauma, maybe early in your childhood or in your early adulthood. Maybe you experienced a near-death experience or something like that, some sort of serious disease or injury that's left you traumatized. And that trauma, now you're carrying it with you. And of course, chances are that if it was a serious trauma, especially early in your life, chances are you've repressed it. You don't even admit to yourself that you have this trauma, and yet it's still there and it's affecting your life, and it's souring your mood, and it's making you depressed, and it's ruining your emotions, and it might even wreck your ability to have and keep a career or to be in a relationship and so forth. So this is a huge problem for people. And if you have this problem, you need some very specialized expert advice for how to deal with that. Because dealing with trauma just on your own, without any kind of expertise or advice, that's really tricky and challenging. Most people don't know how to do that. And you're going to waste decades of your life struggling with it unnecessarily. There's also the subfield of mental disorders. People with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, OCD, depression could be a mental disorder for some people, ADHD, and this sort of stuff. And this usually requires specialized knowledge. Sometimes I have people who will post me comments under my videos, or they will even send me personalized emails or messages on my forum, and they will admit to me some problem that they have, some mental disorder. And it could be something rather serious. And then they ask me for advice. And I'm not really an expert in serious mental disorders, but what I always tell them is that if you've got a serious mental disorder, you have to understand that you're not the first person who's had this. People have been having this disorder for thousands of years, hundreds of years, and there are experts and books and material that have been designed and written for just your situation. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to be in the dark. You just got to go and be willing to do the research and find that specific expertise that you need on your specific issue, right? So that's all that requires. Don't be afraid. Don't be worried about it. You can solve your problem. All these problems are solvable. You just got to be willing to do the research and to find the experts who have the knowledge that you need and the solutions that will work for you. And sometimes that requires some searching. But the good news is that all that information is out there. The problem is that most people don't know that this information is out there. It might seem obvious. I'm talking about these subfields as though it's the most obvious stuff. But you'd be surprised. People go 30, 40 years suffering from some trauma or some mental disorder or from some emotional issue or some shadow issue or some sexual hang-up. They go for 30, 40 years, and it never even occurs to them that, hey, there's an entire subfield of self-help that can help me with this, of other people who have gone through this and solved it. See? On the one hand, it's so obvious. On the other hand, it's not obvious at all if you don't know about it, which is why we're going through all this. We're covering all the bases here. There's also the subfield of personality types. This can be very powerful. For example, you can learn about the Myers-Briggs personality types, and there's a lot to learn there. You can learn about the Enneagram, and there's various other kinds of personality type assessments and models and schemes that are out there that you can learn. You can take various tests, and they can tell you about what your personality type is. And while, of course, they're not definitive, and they shouldn't be your only tool for understanding yourself, they can be very powerful for helping you to understand what type of person you are, what your true identity is, what kind of career you should have based on your personality type, what kind of relationships you should cultivate based on your personality type. So that can be very helpful. to getting to know yourself, especially if you're young. Because when you're young, when you're in your teens and 20s, basically, you don't know who you are. I don't mean metaphysically, existentially, spiritually. I mean, you don't even know who you are as an ego. You don't even know what you like and what you don't like, what kind of career you should have or what kind of career you shouldn't have, what kind of business you should be in, what kind of business you shouldn't be in, what kind of women you should be sleeping with and what kind of women you shouldn't be sleeping with, and men and so forth, right? And that's just because you haven't really studied and understood your own personality. And personality is different from your existential identity as the absolute consciousness, nothingness, the stuff that enlightenment reveals. Right? Personality is still going to be there. Even if when you're fully enlightened, you still have a personality and you still want to understand your own personality. There's also the subfield of NLP and hypnosis. NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. I sort of lump these together because both of them are really techniques and tricks that you can use to program your own mind. And they can be very powerful. There's also a lot there. It's a very technical field. You can learn various kinds of visualization and techniques and ways of speaking to yourself, and even self-hypnosis to hypnotize yourself, to accomplish all sorts of things in your life, to make state changes so you can actually change the emotions you feel in your body based on these various NLP techniques, for example. And that can make you a lot more productive in whatever areas you want to be. There's also the field of religion. You can study religion. You can study Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, Tantra, Jainism, Sikhism, paganism, whatever other kind of isms are out there. You can study them all. You got to be careful, though. What I'm not suggesting you do is pick a religion and then become a dogmatic adherent of it. What I suggest is that you study all religions and that you pick and choose very carefully various bits of wisdom from each tradition, because there's a lot of wisdom in all these traditions, but also a lot of corruption and dogma and nonsense, which will retard your growth. So you have to be very careful and choosy. And you also don't want to become exclusive and start to believe that Christianity is going to solve all your problems, or that it's the one true way to do spirituality, or Buddhism, or anything else. Which brings us to spirituality. Spirituality is a giant subfield of self-help. And then within spirituality, there are subfields. So spirituality is an important subfield. It's not just wishful thinking. It's not the same thing as religion. There's actually a lot of very powerful spiritual techniques which will totally transform your whole life. And in fact, spirituality is really where you're going to get your biggest gains in your life. If you want to transform your life the most, allocate all of your skill points into spirituality. You're going to get a lot more out of it than you will from pursuing success or business or anything else. Because spirituality is really where you start to address the root existential issues that are governing your life. All the stuff that your success and your business and your relationships and all the other stuff that even if you became successful in, you still didn't really solve anything. You're still unsatisfied. Well, now that's when you turn to spirituality and you start to research all the subfields of spirituality, like non-duality, which I highly encourage. A very good subfield to study. Meditation, mindfulness, also a really good one. There's so many different meditation teachings out there. Yoga, many different kinds of yoga. And I'm not talking about Hatha yoga, Western style yoga. I'm mostly talking about various Indian kind of yogas, the old school original meditative forms of yoga, like Kriya yoga, Kundalini yoga, and others like that. There's the subfield of psychedelics, which I'm a huge fan of, as you know. There's also a giant subfield called New Age. New Age / paranormal / psychic abilities. And this is a really, really deep subfield, which has further subfields within it, including things like astral projection, clairvoyance, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, chakras and auras and channeling and healing. There's a lot there, like a lot there. And you'll be shocked at how practical some of those things are and how real some of those things are, like you never could imagine. under the materialist paradigm that usually you're on when you start when you start self-help, right? So a lot of stage orange people who start self-help stay far away from this whole spiritual realm of self-help and from the new age realm because they view it as just some sort of delusion or some sort of like a new form of religion. But that's really just because they haven't actually studied it. They don't really know what it's about. But there's so much there. And if you're one of these people who has some natural psychic abilities, paranormal abilities, you're going to have to do a lot of research into this subfield to start to understand what you're really going through. Because chances are you're kind of on your own. You're different from everybody else around you. You're not like your friends. You have these abilities, but you also don't know what these abilities are. They could be freaking you out, scaring you. You're not sure what to do with them or what they mean. You might think you're losing your mind or going insane. You might even be on medications that help to suppress this sort of stuff, when actually this is an enormous gift, but you have to learn how to develop this gift. And that's going to start by you doing a lot of research into these things. You know, again, sometimes people write to me and ask me comments or write me personal messages with this sort of problem of like, Leo, I experienced this weird paranormal thing and I don't know what to do about it. And I've been maybe keeping it a secret because none of my friends or family understand. But I don't know, like, is this normal? I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is this right? Like, I started meditating and then I started seeing some auras or my chakra activator, some weird thing like this, or I started to astral project when I'm sleeping. And like, I don't know what to make of this. Am I losing my mind? And of course, the answer is no, you're not losing your mind. You just got to do much more research into what's happening with you. All of this stuff is just completely standard. There's nothing weird about it at all. You just haven't been taught about it. It's not part of our standard mainstream spiral dynamic stage orange culture that we're in. We're in a very materialist culture. So of course our materialist culture denies all this stuff, which is why it's going to take even extra work from you to do research into these subfields. And if you do, you will discover a whole new world of possibilities and people who are just like you, who have explored all this stuff, who have become experts in all this stuff, and have actually channeled all these weird abilities into creating a beautiful, powerful life. There's also the subfield of shamanism and occult. There's a lot of occult teachings out there. Personally, I don't get too deeply into them because I feel like they're a distraction. I would much rather focus on non-duality and consciousness work. But and also because I'm not one of these super psychically gifted people, but I can understand how those who are psychically gifted and have certain occult tendencies and are more mystically minded, that they can get into that shamanism and occult type stuff. And so, yeah, you could research that. I just want to warn you that it can become a deep rabbit hole and a distraction. In fact, this whole psychic paranormal realm, this whole new age realm can become a big distraction from simply pursuing enlightenment and mastery of your everyday world. Make sure you master your everyday world first. Master your emotions. Master your family situation. Master your career. Master your finances. Master the basic stuff before you go chasing occult stuff. Because I know people who go chasing occult stuff, but then their ordinary life is in shambles. And then they suffer from that. All right, so you got to get your priorities straight. There's also the subfield of healing. And there's lots of different kinds of healing. Mental healing, physical healing, emotional healing, spiritual healing, occult forms of healing, paranormal healing abilities that you can develop. There's a lot to healing. And people need healing in different ways. Many people need emotional healing. Many people need physical healing. Many people need spiritual healing. So you can read about that. And there's many different healing modalities out there that you can learn and practice and find what works for you. You know, with healing, it's all about finding the right fit. You got to find the technique that's going to fit for your particular issue that you have. And different people, like I said, need healing in different ways. So that's going to take some research on your part. There's also the subfield of psychology. There are many books that are written by classic psychologists like Freud and Jung and Reich and Maslow and Fromm and Rogers, all the classic psychologists that have become prominent over the last 100 years. Some of them have silly ideas. Some of them have very useful ideas. You got to be choosy and selective about psychology. But there's a lot. Like, for example, I got a lot of value from studying Abraham Maslow's work, Erich Fromm's work, Carl Rogers. These are some top-notch psychologists. I don't recommend Freud too much. You could get some value at reading Carl Jung. And there are many other psychologists that I haven't really read, but you could definitely, go into that field. And I'm sure there are many cutting-edge new psychologists that are doing psychology today that is great stuff. There's an entire academic discipline of positive psychology, and people like Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who's the author of Flow, the book Flow, and Carol Dweck, and various other kinds of people who are doing psychological research right now, which is more in the new vein of positive psychology, which is more practical and you can apply it more directly to your life. So that's good stuff. There's also transpersonal psychology. Perhaps the best expert in this field is Stanislav Grof. He's done a lot of work on transpersonal psychology, and this is where positive psychology starts to move into spirituality and some of this new age paranormal stuff. And so it's like the intersection of psychology and spirituality and new age stuff. These are the higher stages of the spiral. So this is like turquoise level stuff. And especially if you suffer from trauma or deep emotional problems, you can get a lot of value from transpersonal psychology and the work of Stan Grof. For example, I released an episode on shamanic breathing, and that's a very powerful transpersonal psychology technique. And there's many more like that out there. So really cool field to study. In fact, I think it's the best branch of psychology. If I was going to a university to get a degree in psychology, I would get a degree in transpersonal psychology. But of course, very few universities actually offer this type of degree. Probably only a handful in the world, but they do exist. I know there are a few in California that exist. Not sure about elsewhere in the world. It will become more popular in the future, though, that's for sure. Over the next 100 years, transpersonal psychology will become huge because it's exactly the direction that psychology needs to go. The whole problem with traditional psychology is that it didn't factor in the entire spiritual realm and all the insights that you get from consciousness work. It didn't factor that in. So that's what transpersonal psychology does. Then there's a subfield that's called lifestyle design. This is various kinds of books and teachings which show you how to live your life in a more adventurous and fun way. I know Tim Ferriss is sort of an advocate of this. And there's various kinds of books on how to travel around, create a fun lifestyle for yourself, become independent financially, and then use your freedom to do cool stuff, go on vacations, go vagabonding around the world, and exploring different cultures and cuisines and countries. And there's people out there who teach you how to do this. So if you're the adventurous type and you want to use self-help and your financial freedom to live this sort of fun, adventurous lifestyle, you can find experts who will show you how they did that. There's also the subfield of what I would call technical how-to. I don't know how else to call this. Technical how-to. These are all the how-to books that have ever been written. You can go into a bookstore and find how-to books about almost anything. Public speaking, how to be more humorous, how to draw, how to dress as a man, how to dress as a woman. I mean, there's so many how-to books out there. In fact, the whole how-to book industry, there's an entire industry that just pumps out these how-to books. Now, a lot of them are very flaky and not high quality, but some of them are really high quality. You got to do your research and find the good ones. But basically anything you want to learn how to do, someone has written a guide or a book or created a course or a seminar for how to do it. So you can just ask yourself, what do I want to do in my life that I can't do right now? Or if you're wondering, well, yeah, I want to advance my life in this area here, but I don't know how. Well, you just type in how to blank and then fill in the blank with whatever you want to learn how to do, and you'll find some kind of solution there. Now, those are all the subfields that I would call traditional self-help. And then there are some aspects that I hesitate to call self-help, but which are still very important. And these would be politics and government. Educating yourself about how politics and government work. That is something that a lot of people are missing these days. Most people these days, they're so passionate about politics, whether they're on the left or the right. But what I notice is that so few of them actually have any kind of academic foundation about politics. They haven't read a single book about politics. They haven't read a single book about feminism. They haven't read a single book about postmodernism. They haven't read a single book about how government works. They haven't read a single book about the history of how politics evolved in America or around the world. They haven't read a single book about fascism or communism or socialism or capitalism, right? You got to read about this shit. And this becomes a big problem for us as a nation and for us as a globe, is because most of our citizens are so ignorant about politics that their version of politics just becomes a religion. It just becomes an ideology, like capitalism is awesome and communism is evil. It becomes just this black and white, ridiculous identity politics. That's what it becomes. So if you're going to have political opinions at all, and if you're going to vote, make sure you educate yourself about how politics really works. Not partisan stuff. I mean like the foundations of politics, the foundations of public policy, the foundations of government. There's a lot of research you could do there. A lot of really good books are available. Also, the subfield of philosophy, metaphysics, and epistemology. There's a lot of books that have been written over the years about philosophy. And a lot of them, honestly, are a waste of your time. A lot of them are filled with bullshit. But on the other hand, personally for me, my entire approach to self-help is grounded in philosophy, metaphysics, and epistemology. That's why the material that I release is much deeper and more profound than almost all other self-help teachers out there. Because it's grounded in something much, much deeper, much more fundamental. It's grounded in the ultimate questions about the nature of reality and about truth, the pursuit of truth. That's what philosophy is about. Figuring out how knowledge works. These are absolutely foundational topics, which are rarely taught in school. They're taught very inadequately. And because people have such a poor grasp of these topics, they're not able to question their own reality very deeply. And so any self-help that they do and any kind of even spiritual work they do, it's all surface level stuff. It doesn't really get to the root of what existence is. And so those problems that are there in you, which are existential problems, those never get addressed, which is why you can keep doing self-help over and over and over again for decades and still really not resolve your problems, because your deepest problems are existential problems. They're really metaphysical and epistemic problems. But you can't know that until you spend a lot of time studying this subfield. There's also the subfield of social psychology, cognitive psychology, and anthropology. There are a lot of great books written about these topics, and there's a lot of great research being done today in various kinds of universities about various kinds of psychological and anthropological studies and experiments that are being done that teach you about the nature of the human mind, the nature of the brain, the nature of culture, the nature of societies. We're learning a lot about that in the last 50 to 100 years. And new books are coming out on these topics every year, and they're very eye-opening. They put things into perspective for you. They teach you why mankind works the way that it works, why people are selfish, why people are evil, why people are biased, why people are racist, why people are religious, why people are ethnocentric, so forth. Also, a very broad category, but still very important, is the subfield of history and science. Most people just don't have a good grasp of history and science. And by science, I mean stuff like you can read up on evolution, quantum mechanics, relativity, chaos theory, biology, physics. Like, there's so much here that you're missing out on. And all that stuff will serve as a foundation for your understanding of all of life. And even though it's not directly related to your self-help and your success, it's not directly going to help you to get laid or to earn a bunch of money or to deal with some emotional trauma that you have. But what I find is that actually these sorts of general topics are super important in my understanding of reality as a whole. And so most of my time actually these days is not spent reading narrowly focused self-help books on how to become more successful or how to take care of some emotional issue. They are actually focused on these very general, broad topics, scientific topics, historical topics. I love to read about history, study history. History puts all of mankind's nonsense into perspective. By reading history, you learn all the traps and mistakes that have happened in politics, in government, in race relations, in sex and gender relations, within science, within philosophy. You learn about all the errors, all the mistakes that mankind has made, so that then you don't repeat those same mistakes yourself. It's all right there in the history books. If you go through all the history books and you read them very carefully, you can learn a lot of lessons about how to live your life properly just from the history books. And also, a lot of people have only knowledge of Western history, but not history of the rest of the world. Because in our schools, we're not taught the history of Africa or Japan or China or India or the Middle East. So people are so ignorant about other cultures outside of American culture and European culture that they don't have the proper context. They don't really understand. And also, if you're only studying history from the Western perspective, then you're implicitly buying into the whole Western paradigm. You're not looking at the world from the perspective of other cultures, other races, other ethnic groups. And that's a real shame. Because the whole point of learning about all these different subfields is that it opens you up to new perspectives. It gives you more flexibility. There are solutions that exist within Indian culture and Japanese culture and Chinese culture and Middle Eastern culture. Solutions to your problems exist in those cultures, and yet you never hear about them because you're so locked into the Western cultural perspective. And of course, the Western cultural perspective has all sorts of biases built into it that you're not aware of until you start to study other cultures. And lastly, I would say the last subfield is biographies. Biographies are important for people who are pursuing self-help because in reading a high-quality biography of some inspiring human being, you get to see what it took for that human being to become who he or she became. Like, what did it take to become someone like a John F. Kennedy or a Gandhi or an Albert Einstein or a Nikola Tesla or Benjamin Franklin or an Abraham Lincoln? What kind of leadership qualities were required? What kind of trials and tribulations did these people go through? What kind of fears did they have? What kind of pathologies and neuroses did they overcome? What kind of habits did they build? How did they do it? How did they get their financing for their first business? How did they advance their career? How did they persevere against all these obstacles that they had, right? By reading biographies, you get insights into that, and that shows you that, oh, these people, they were just human beings like me. They worked really hard, and they worked through all these challenges, and look how high they got. And that shows you that, oh, I can do that too. And you can actually model your life on some of these biographies. They can also inspire you. They can also show you what it's like to be a human being with integrity and with a certain set of values, with higher consciousness ideals. And that can be really good if you're just getting your feet wet with self-help. Because one of the biggest things that people lack when they start self-help is they just lack imagination. They lack a sense of what's possible with their life, right? They lack a sense of vision. They lack a sense of ambition because they've just kind of been living an ordinary life and they've never really thought about, how do I build a great life? Who could I really become in my life by dedicate myself to it? If I have a vision, if I set some goals, and if I have all these subfields that I study, I have all these tools at my disposal that I can use to become a great human being. And really, right now is the best time to be alive, because at no other time in human history was so much expertise and knowledge available to you so easily, so quickly, so cheaply as today. All of these subfields are available to you. 100 years ago, many of these subfields didn't even exist. So you would be a fool to take this for granted. Almost anything you want to do in your life, someone else has already done. Someone else has devoted 40 years to becoming an expert in that thing. Whatever it is, whatever problem you think you have that can't be solved, someone has already solved it. They've been solving it for 40 years, and they've been teaching other people how to solve it quickly and easily and painlessly. And all you got to do is you got to seek out that expert. Find their book, find their course, find their teaching, and study it and then apply it. That's it. It's a very simple solution, very simple formula. You would be foolish not to take advantage of all this expertise that has existed, that people have invested so much time. People invest years writing these books, packing these books full of wisdom of 40 years of their deepest experiences and all their lessons and all their trials and tribulations. They extract the best nuggets of that and put that in the book. And all you got to do is just read the book and not be lazy. So don't take this for granted. Now, most of these subfields, notice that I've mentioned up above, they're not covered in school or university, almost at all. School or university doesn't just not cover them, it doesn't even tell you that these things are in existence. And oftentimes it does even worse, where it demonizes and it actually dismisses the importance or validity of some of these subfields. For example, nowhere in academia or in science or in university will they tell you that there's enormous value to be gained from studying the New Age subfield or the spirituality subfield or the emotional mastery subfield or the psychedelic subfield or the addiction recovery subfield or the success and productivity subfield, right? These are not traditional academic university topics. And so what happens is that even if you went to university and you fancy yourself a rather educated person, ultimately all the topics that are the most important for your happiness and well-being in life and your success, all the topics I just listed up above, you almost know nothing about them unless you have made a deliberate effort to educate yourself about them by studying these various subfields. Because you sure as hell weren't taught this stuff in university or in high school. Science is not going to teach you this stuff because science is worried about very specific types of problems, which have really nothing to do with emotional mastery, have nothing to do with your success and your ability to handle yourself or your ability to find a sense of purpose in your life. See? And in this way, university is really a travesty because the most important topics are not taught. And so people spend 12 years going through school and another 4 or 6 years going through university, and they come out of that and they're completely clueless about what they need to do to survive in the world. But that is the state of our current education system, so that's going to be that way for a while. In the meantime, though, what you got to do is you got to take responsibility and double your efforts to learn this stuff yourself. The silver lining is that it's much more enjoyable to learn this stuff on your own without having to do stupid homework assignments or essays or reports or any of that. You can teach all this stuff to yourself, and it's going to be much more enjoyable than school ever was for you. So don't be put off by that. And it's also super accessible. It's super easy. It doesn't cost much money. You can buy cheap books and get it all done. And you get to set your own direction. Nobody tells you what you got to study. You can study whatever you want, whatever works best for you, whatever you need, whatever floats your boat. Now, of course, notice that Actualized.org doesn't cover all of these subfields. I tend to have specific things that I focus on with the videos that I shoot. Although I do try to cover a broad swath of stuff, we talk a lot about various kinds of things, from spirituality to psychedelics to success and relationships and life purpose and confidence and self-esteem. And we'll be branching out even further in the future with future episodes. But you have to understand that I'm not going to cover everything. Don't expect me to be your only source. I could create a separate channel about each one of these subfields that I mentioned, and I could devote my entire life just to pumping out videos on that particular subfield. But for me, that's not what I want to do. I have certain topics that I want to cover, and I also want to introduce. I see myself as sort of a person who introduces people to this, and then you can go and find more specialized experts. Notice that no one teacher or school or teaching will ever cover all of these subfields. It's way too much. This is such a wide domain, this self-help stuff. Most teachers you find will be very, very narrowly specialized. Most spiritual schools and teachings will be very, very narrowly specialized. So don't be surprised if they're not going to give you all the solutions to all your problems. You got to be the CEO of your own life. Don't outsource that responsibility to anyone else, because they will fail at it for you. You can only do it yourself. That means you got to figure out which subfields you need to study. And I can't tell you which subfields you got to study. That all depends on what kind of issues you have, what your childhood was like, what your genetics are like, and what your interests are like, what your personality type is like, and so forth. See? And you won't know which of these subfields is going to have the perfect solution for you. Like I said, some of these subfields have the ability to save your life. They are that valuable. They are that powerful. But the problem is that you don't know which ones until you've delved into each one and gotten a lay of the land. And to do that, you really got to read 5 to 10 books within a subfield just to understand what that subfield is about and how much value it can offer to you. Many people, they look at one of these subfields and they say, oh, well, that New Age subfield, that's kind of stupid. It's not going to be very valuable. That NLP subfield, oh, that's not really powerful. That love subfield, who wants to study that? That's not going to change my life. Be very careful about that. You got to keep a very open mind. I'll tell you this right now. Every one of these subfields exists for good reason. It's not that just some fool woke up one day and said, you know what, I'm just going to write a book on some stupid topic, some New Age topic, and I'll just put it out there just to earn a bunch of money and buy myself a sports car. That's not how these books get written. Usually the way these books get written is that some expert has struggled for decades in their own life, going through trauma and problems and not knowing how to figure it out. And then finally they figured it out through luck and through study and trial and error. And then after many, many decades of that and teaching others, finally they compile all their wisdom into this concise little book. So it's there for a reason. There's not a single extraneous subfield of all the fields I mentioned. Not a single one. All of them are necessary. All of them serve a useful function. All of them solve specific problems that human beings have encountered by the thousands and millions. So if it seems to you that some subfield is stupid and pointless and bullshit, well, that's just your own bias. That's your own closed-mindedness talking. That's what that is. So be careful not to judge too quickly. There's enormous value in each of these subfields. The problem, of course, though, is that you have a very limited amount of time, and there's way too many books to read, and even way too many subfields for you to explore them all. So you got to be a little selective, and you got to decide what's right for you. What do you need most now to change your life and to kickstart your journey? And then over time, you'll branch out and explore more and more subfields. But also, I want to encourage you not just to pursue those subfields which will give you some immediate tangible results, like maybe if you struggle getting laid, you probably obviously want to go read a book about how to date and how to get laid. That's kind of obvious. But go further than that. I challenge you to be an explorer and an adventurer. Explore these various subfields, especially ones that maybe normally you wouldn't think would be valuable to you. Explore them anyways. Buy a few books from them, read them, just to see what's possible there. You'll be shocked to see the kind of discoveries you'll make. That's one of the most amazing things about self-help is that you study stuff that you think is stupid, and then you realize just how wrong you were and just how much value there is in this thing. Now, of course, you're not going to need every subfield, so don't go trying to just read as much as you possibly can. You want to be strategic about what you're reading and what you're studying. So keep it to stuff that's going to be things you can take action on. Not just read about, but stuff you can take action on. Stuff that will actually engage you. And the stuff that engages you is usually the stuff that you're lacking in your life. If you're lacking a good career, if you're lacking in finances, if you're lacking in health, then you probably want to start with those topics, but then also explore and branch out into stuff that maybe you normally wouldn't. By exploring more of these subfields, you're going to move automatically into spiral dynamics stage yellow. Because what we're doing here by studying all these subfields is we're getting such a diversity of perspectives, so many perspectives about so many facets of life that we're not going to be able to stay in our rigid one perspective view of the world that we had before we started all this research. So which subfields are the best for you? Well, it very much depends on you, but I'll give you a few that I think are really good for newbies to start with. So firstly, success and productivity and goal setting. That's a really good foundational one. Secondly is self-esteem and confidence, because so many people have problems with self-esteem and confidence. And because that's a very generic problem, that if you have a problem there, that's going to carry over into everything, into your relationships, into your career, into your business, into your own feelings about yourself and about your life. Also, emotional mastery. That's absolutely essential for everybody because your emotions run your entire life. And if you're suffering in your life, then it's all emotional. It's not factual. It's not objective. It's purely emotional. All suffering is purely emotional. And also, I recommend studying relationships because chances are you have plenty of relationships in your life or you want to form high-quality relationships, and we are not taught how to relate properly to other people, especially within intimate relationships. And the last subfield is spirituality. Spirituality, like I said, has the possibility of completely transforming your life, and that's where you get the deepest growth, is when you start to get into spirituality. But with spirituality, the problem, there's sort of a cost to that. The payoffs of spiritual work is huge payoffs, but the downside is that it takes time. It takes time for spirituality to start to bear fruit. Probably takes a few years of work where you do a lot of work, but you don't see a lot of results, and then the results start pouring in. So I recommend you start investing in that early so you can get that first few years, that first few unproductive years out of the way, and then you'll be enjoying the fruits of your work. So we're going to end this with a homework assignment, And the homework assignment is very simple. What I want you to do is I want you to pick 3 new subfields that you don't have a lot of experience in out of those that I've mentioned above. And I want you to commit to purchasing 3 books from each one of these 3 subfields. So in total, you're going to buy 9 books. Of course, you're going to want to research these books and find 3 good books from each of these subfields. So that's your homework assignment. Now, I'm not saying you have to necessarily read all these books. I'm just saying I want you to do some research into it and then to buy them and to have them sitting on your bookshelf or on your office desk looking you in the face. You don't have to read them per se, just have them there. And just by having them and by purchasing them already, you're going to gravitate towards picking one of those up and reading it. Just that small step. And then, by reading that one book, in that book, you're going to find exercises, techniques, ideas, resources, other book recommendations that book talks about, various kinds of references and resources. And then it's going to start to flower and geometrically lead to new stuff. And then that one book will lead to 3 more books, and those 3 books will lead to 3 more books, and so on and so forth. And then before you know it, you'll be neck deep in all sorts of self-help stuff. And you will have all sorts of solutions and possibilities for your life that you never had before. That's one of the most amazing things to me about studying all these subfields. When you study them deeply enough and broadly enough, eventually you get to the point where you feel like any problem that will arise in your life, you're going to have a solution for. Even if you don't have it in the back of your mind already, you know where you can go to find the book that will have the solution, because you already know all these subfields, kind of in a broad sense, not in a deep way, just in a broad sense. You know that they're out there. So you know that if you have some trauma, you know where to go to fix your trauma. If you have some weird New Age mystical experience, you know where to go to find out what the solution to that is. If you have a problem while you're meditating, you know where to go to find a solution to your meditation problem. If you ever get depressed, you know what to do. And this is the exact opposite of what most people in society have. Most people in society are so lacking in expertise and in information that when they have a problem, they don't even know that there is a solution to their problem. And they live with their problem for 10 or 20 years, sometimes for their entire life, suffering this problem when the solution was just sitting there in a book that they never knew about. So do that homework assignment, and if you need ideas for books, check out my book list, where I have over 200 books that I review, and a lot of my favorite books are there. Rare type of books that you don't really find anywhere else. For those of you who already have the book list, I would challenge you to actually not just pick 9 books from my book list, because probably you've already done that. I would challenge you instead to branch out and do a little bit of independent research by yourself into 3 new subfields that I mentioned, and find 3 new books that are not on my book list for yourself. Because you need to teach yourself how to not just get books from me, but also discover them for yourself. And I will be updating my book list in the future with more new books. I've been reading quite a lot of great books lately, which I'll be adding in the months to come. I usually try to update my book list twice a year. And I've already updated it for free for those who purchased it, like, I think 5 or 6 times at this point. So lots of free updates with lots of new books. I think I've added over 50 new books to my book list since I first released it. And all the new books that I'm adding are usually higher and higher quality books than the ones that were there at the very beginning, because I'm getting much more choosy about the books that I read. And yeah, I'm just my standards for what counts as a high quality book has changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. Because as my knowledge base grows, I get a much deeper understanding of what a good book is and what a bad book is. And you will develop that sense as well as you read more and more. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. Please remember to click that like button for me and come check out Actualized.org. That's my website. You will find the book list there, the life purpose course there, my blog, and the forum where you can go and talk about all this stuff. And the final thing I want to end on is this, a little story from 10th grade. When I entered 10th grade, I deliberately wanted to challenge myself by taking some really difficult AP classes, advanced placement classes that were offered at my high school. Before that, I was just taking sort of the easy classes. And in 10th grade, I just said, you know what? I want to challenge myself. So I enrolled in like 3 AP classes, and one of them was AP European History. And that was the hardest class I've ever taken. And it was probably the hardest class in my whole school. We had a really kind of a tough teacher, and he expected a lot from us. And also because the topic is so broad, there's so much to European history to learn. And anyways, so I was struggling through this class for the whole year. And I kept taking tests that my teacher would be giving me in preparation for the ultimate AP exam that comes at the end of the year. Because the whole point of the AP class is to prepare you for the AP exam that you need to pass in April or in May, around that time. So the whole year we're preparing for that. And I keep taking tests and writing essays for my teacher, and I keep just like bombing these tests and just doing very poorly on them, even though my teacher is a really good teacher. You know, he writes entire whiteboards full of notes, and I'm sitting there copying down all these notes and studying all this stuff, but I'm still like, my grasp of European history was so poor. And I just couldn't understand, you know, why I'm struggling so much in this class. I think I ended up getting a 3 out of 5 on my AP European history test. So I passed the test, but ultimately, it was a tough going for me. And then the next year, I took more AP classes, and I did really good at them, and I did really great for the rest of my academic career. But what I learned in 11th grade, after I finished the 10th grade, and I struggled so much, is that I learned that actually what I wasn't doing, the reason I was struggling so much, was because there was a European history textbook that came with the class that I didn't read at all, that had all the answers in it, that had all the history in it. And I was looking at that time, I was looking at kids around me who were like doing good on their tests. And it baffled me, like, how are you guys doing good when I'm doing so bad? And I don't understand what's wrong. So it took me a whole year after the whole class was over to realize that I wasn't reading the book. I wasn't reading the book. That's it. All the answers were in the book. It didn't click for me that I was supposed to read a fucking book, right? And it would seem like, well, but Leo, how could that be? It was so obvious. How could you not connect those two dots? But that's exactly how learning is that it's not obvious until it becomes obvious. It's always obvious after the fact. And that's exactly how it is with self-help and all of your personal problems. So right now you're struggling with your depression or your anxiety, or you're struggling with business or your career or your life purpose, or you're struggling with spirituality, and it just seems confusing and you don't know what the answers are, and it seems like you'll never get it. It seems hopeless. But then after the fact, it will seem so obvious. That's always how learning works. So the moral of this story is read the fucking book. The answers are all there for you. The problem is you're not connecting the dots. It's the most obvious stuff that you're overlooking. The information is all out there. Don't just expect that you're going to get everything you need for this journey from me or from YouTube or from videos. It's not going to happen. There is depth and detail that comes within books that you will not get from me lecturing to you. My mistake with this European history class was that I thought that just by listening to the teacher lecturing to me, that the teacher would teach me everything that I needed to know to pass the test. That wasn't the case. And it was my mistake for thinking that it worked like that. That was just a false assumption I had. I didn't realize that, yes, the teacher is lecturing. He's a great lecturer, and he writes lots of notes on the whiteboard, and I'm copying it all down in my notebook, but that's not enough. Not enough. These actualized videos are not enough for you to succeed on this journey. You need to read. You need to read the fucking book. A lot of you ask me very silly questions about various kinds of personal development problems you have. And what that tells me is that you're asking these silly questions because you haven't bothered to do the reading. You haven't bothered to do the homework assignments. You think you can just skate by listening to me while I'm talking and you're fucking playing video games or something, and I'm just talking in the background, and you think that's going to be enough for you to master your life? Get fucking real. You're a joker. You're not serious about this. You haven't realized how important this is to your life, what this really means for you, how valuable this information is. You're still taking it for granted. And also, a lot of you question me and ask me all sorts of skeptical questions about enlightenment, about this and about that. Oh, Leo, how could you possibly know this? And oh, Leo, how could you possibly know that? Oh, you're so arrogant and this and this. Because you're not doing the fucking reading. I'm not the arrogant one. I'm not the ignorant one. You are. There's nothing skeptical or questionable about what I'm saying. You don't need to debunk what I'm saying. You just got to fucking read. Most people don't read. It's just that simple. If you read more, most of your life's problems would be solved. It really can be that simple. Sometimes solutions are just that simple. Most of your results just come from the fundamentals, executing on the stuff that's just basic. If you can't discipline yourself to do something as basic as reading, I mean, how serious are you about mastering your life? How serious are you about spirituality? How serious are you about creating an incredible life for yourself? You think that's going to happen for a person who's too lazy to read 100 books? No, you're completely not seeing the value of this work. If you really saw the full value of this work, you would be willing to read 100 books. You'd be willing to read 200 books. You'd be willing to read 500 books. You'd be willing to do anything, whatever it takes to get it done. That's the kind of attitude you need. That's the attitude of a winner, is I will do whatever it takes. Not just listening to convenient videos where I regurgitate everything for you. See? In a sense, I'm doing you a disservice by doing that, because I'm making you weak and lazy and complacent in taking all this information for granted. Because all this information that I reveal to you, this is information that I've spent years thinking about, studying, grinding towards, working my ass off to acquire. And for you, it's just a 1 hour, 2 hour episode of just me telling you stuff, and it just goes in one ear and out the other, and that's it. That's it. That's not going to be enough to transform your life. So get serious, do the homework, read the books, do the research, and then stick around for more, and that's where you're going to see the magic happen.